Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about Piaget's theories about cognitive development, and then we'll also talk about his 4 stages of cognitive development here. Piaget was studying, in probably the 1930s and 40s. He was actually a contemporary of Alfred Binet, who developed the first IQ test. So he was really interested in studying of children, and he was really the first to study children's cognitive development. He proposed that children think differently than adults, which makes a whole lot of sense to us. But at his time, a lot of times the idea was children should be seen and not heard. Children shouldn't really be interacted with. They were kind of thought children were like little adults, but that definitely was not the case. So he really wanted to understand how is it that kids think differently than adults, and how can we help them to learn. And he suggested that children experience cognitive development in stages. So he had some different theories about how children's cognitive abilities actually develop. His research is criticized sometimes because much of his research was actually based on the study of his own children. He had 3 children with his wife and really intensely studied each of his children, but he also studied many other children as well. But many of his initial theories came from observing his own children. So he came up with 2 different ways that he felt children learned as they developed. And he came up with 2 different ideas called assimilation and accommodation. So he said children's cognitive abilities grow through this process of assimilation and accommodation. So assimilation is really just adding new information to information that you already have. Or it's also using information that you already have to help you understand new experiences. So if you have a PC at home and you decide you want to get a Mac, you're going to use some of that information that you have, some of that knowledge that you have about how to use a PC, how to turn it on, where the buttons are, for your Mac. But some of them obviously are not going to work, right? So if you're learning a new computer program, you can use some of that old information that you have and just add that new information. What's different about the Mac than the PC. Sometimes kids, they'll see something new that they've never seen before. So they might see this dog here, which is a chow, and they might think, is that a teddy bear? Is it a chow? Is it a lion? But they are able to recognize that, yep, it's a dog, and they can add that information to their information about dogs. So assimilation is just adding new information that you've learned, whereas accommodation is where you have to actually change the old information that you have in order to accommodate new information. If you talk to a really young kid before 6, 7, they are going to tell you that nickel is worth more than a dime because it's bigger. They think bigger is better, and you can't convince them that a dime is worth more. But as they get a little bit older and they start to learn about money, and they start to learn that bigger is not always better, they can start to understand that a nickel is worth less than a dime, even though that dime is smaller. So accommodation is where you have to accommodate new ideas. So you have to accommodate new information. You have to change your old information to accommodate that new information. So that should be an easy way to remember it. Just remember, accommodate means you have to change. So Piaget has 4 different stages of cognitive development that we're going to talk about. Sensory motor is birth to 2, where they're learning all about their senses and developing their sensory capabilities and their motor skills. Pre-operational is where they're learning language. They may have magical thinking and imaginary friends, and they're pretty egocentric at this age. Concrete operational is kind of the elementary school years. Kids are very concrete in their thinking and very logical in their thinking at this age. If you tell them that it's raining cats and dogs, they're going to go and look for those cats and dogs. Form operational is adolescence to adulthood, and this is where kids start to develop the ability to think abstractly and to think hypothetically. Prior to that, kids cannot think hypothetically at all. So we're going to go over some of the skills and some of the information about each of these stages. So the sensory motor stage is birth to 2 years, and this is where kids are exploring the world through their sensory experiences, their vision's developing, their hearing's developing, they're learning about balance and walking, touch, taste, all those senses they're learning about, as well as physical movements as well. One of the main skills that kids learn at this stage is what we call object permanence. And the infant, this is where kids start to learn that just because they can't see an object doesn't mean that it's not there. So if you have a little niece or nephew that's little, under 2 years old, and they start to play with your cell phone, you can usually distract them, take away that cell phone, put it away, and they'll forget about that cell phone. But if they're 2 years old and up, they're gonna look for that cell phone. They're going to find it in your pocket or your purse or wherever you tried to hide it from them. But prior to that age, kids just think it's gone. They see a train go through the tunnel, they lose interest. They think that that train is now gone. So out of sight, when it's out of sight, they assume that it's completely gone. And it's why peekaboo is fun for little kids at this age, which seems like it would be scary that they realize that you're not there. But they actually find it pretty funny when you disappear and come back because they really think you're gone. They think it's kind of magical that you're gone and then all of a sudden you're back. I'm going to post a cute video about this that talks a little bit about object permanence and shows you a little kid having fun with peekaboo. The pre-operational stage is ages 2 to 7, and this is where kids can use language to start exploring the world. Around 3 is where they get pretty good at language, and so they're starting to be able to talk and, put together sentences and really explain what they're seeing and hearing and learning. Kids at this age are really egocentric. They can't imagine the world from anybody else's perspective. They don't have that theory. They haven't developed that theory of mind yet. I think we said theory of mind develops around 5 to 7. I have a video of a little kid. It's a task where they show kids a mountain scene, and then they ask the child to pick out the picture of the mountain scene that the person behind them or behind the scene can actually see. And if they're very egocentric, they'll only see the side that they can see. If they're older and they have developed that theory of mind and recognize that the other person on the other side cannot see the same thing that they can see, they can get beyond that. So it's a really interesting video. And it's very short. And other thing is that kids think the world revolves around them at this stage, and it kind of does if they're lucky. Preschool kids think that they are awesome, even if they've had some pretty good evidence that that's not true. Maybe their friends don't like them or things have happened at school. They still think they're pretty cool, which is kind of, wish we could all go back to that stage some days. So kids at this stage are really into pretend play, imaginary friends. And this is just, they're just learning and trying out the world basically and having a good time. So it's a great age actually. So concrete operational stage is ages 7 to 11. So this is about second grade on. So it's kind of the elementary school years. But kids think really concretely, and they take things very literally. I put my son's Earth Day story on here because he came home from school one day and he's flipping off all the lights. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And he said, well, it's Earth Day. We got to save the Earth. I said, all right, we'll save the Earth. And then the next day, I said, do you think we should turn off the lights? And he said, well, why would we do that? And I said, well, what about the Earth? And he says, that was yesterday. So to him, Earth Day was just one day a year, and we were okay the rest of the year. So they think very, very concretely. I thought this was a super cute picture of this little boy. His mom told him to look up puppy training videos to train their new puppy, and he figured he could just show the video to the puppy, and the puppy would learn from the iPad or whatever. Pretty cute, I thought. So at this stage, children learn a couple different skills: conservation and this reversibility of thought. So they can sort of mentally reverse or undo actions in their mind. So they can imagine that picture filling up that glass and overflowing. And then they can reverse that back as well. But conservation is a skill that's the main skill. And this is where kids learn that volume and mass don't change even though they might look different. So if we pour water into 2 glasses here, and then we pour the one glass of water, so those were equal glasses of water, and we pour this into a fatter glass, it makes it look lower. Kids that have not developed this skill of conservation are going to tell you that there's more water in this one here because it's taller. Kids who have mastered this skill will recognize that you just poured that glass into here, and it's just the shape of the glass that makes it look different. So, and I have a super cute video of a little boy, and I think he's about 5 or 6. He might be even before, and he has not mastered the skill of conservation yet. And it's a really good demonstration of kids that don't understand conservation yet. And this is the age where kids start to recognize that, wait a minute, Santa couldn't really deliver all those toys on Christmas Eve. That's not really possible, right? But prior to this, kids don't even question it. They don't even think about the fact, the logistical nightmare of trying to deliver all those toys. So it's a fun stage. The formal operational stage is adolescent years. This is ages 11 and up, so a little bit of pre-adolescence. But this is where children's cognitive abilities really start to expand, and they're able to think of lots of different possibilities. They're able to think abstractly and hypothetically, so they sort of get away from that logical thought and that real concrete thought, and they're able to imagine all different kinds of possibilities. If you asked them, if you have a third eye, where would you put it? What would you use it for? But a bunch of teenagers, even us as an adults, could probably figure out some good ideas to use that. But you ask a younger kid that they'd be like, well, that's not possible. Why would we do that? So they're much less egocentric during adolescence and much more concerned with other people as well. And so that's the formal operational stage. This last stage is a little unsatisfying, I would say. We're going to talk in the next video about adolescent brain development. And how it sort of relates to this ability, this new cognitive ability, a new thinking ability that they've developed. So we will talk about that next.